Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here with you on a Wednesday. Good show on tap. You know what? I shouldn't even say that anymore because, as you know, as a loyal viewer of MorningLine, every show is good. Yes, so perhaps some better than others, perhaps some guests better than others, and I would say that fits the category this morning. We're going to be talking about medical malpractice. Think. Have you been to a doctor and felt you did not have the proper result and maybe something was done wrong? Same thing with the hospital along those lines. A question about whether or not you maybe were wronged and if you possibly have a malpractice case. Well, we've got someone here to talk about it, take your questions throughout the show, and kind of fill us in on the backstory of what it takes to have one of those cases, and that's malpractice attorney here in town, Clint Kelly. Good morning to you, sir. It's always nice to have you on. Boy, I've learned a lot from you. Well, I have over the years. You've been coming on with us for a while. Every time you come on, I learn something. I appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate that.
And he's a friend, but I mean, I really have learned from you.
Well, and I hope the people who watch the show have too, because it's one of those areas of law that's not talked about very much, but it's important to anyone else as some of the other issues.
When it happens to you, it's just, we'll get into the basics and we'll open up the phone line, 737-7587, but I always like to hit you. He's so astute in terms of following what's going on in the country, not just locally with this type of stuff. Anything you want to talk about that's caught your eye of late? Or I know you have paper here, so I don't know what that's all about.
Well, we can discuss statistics about lawsuits and how many cases are being tried and how many cases are being won statewide. We'll talk about that later. But you were asking me, what have I noticed? I'll tell you what I have been noticing recently are the number of patients who are falling in hospitals. Falling, meaning they're either falling out of their bed, they're being, the rails aren't being put up on their bed, or they're being placed on an x-ray table, particularly elderly people, and they're falling over and they're crushing their bones, breaking bones. We've had about 5 cases come in the last couple of months with people, pardon me, who've either had a shoulder injury or broken ankle or broken leg because they've fallen. And the common denominator is these people were all what they call high fall risk, meaning that the hospital does an assessment to determine what the risk is that they will fall. And then somewhere between that risk assessment and the injury, the staff doesn't take appropriate measures to protect the patient from falling.
So meaning that they knew about it.
Correct.
Okay, and they didn't take the standard of care to the level they should have to keep them involved.
I mean,
what would that be? Yeah, go ahead.
Example, one case was a man, and they're usually elderly. Was a man who was actually being weighed on a scale at a dialysis clinic, and he needed help getting around because he used a cane and a walker, and this healthcare worker put him on the scale and left him there by himself standing. And these scales aren't exactly the most stable pieces of equipment. And after a few seconds, the guy falls down on his side, breaks his hip, crushed his hip, has to have hip replacement. Now, the standard of care is you hold the patient on the scale and you walk the patient back to his seat. It's pretty simple stuff. And all of us who've had elderly grandparents understand falling is the most scary, dangerous thing that can happen. You have to make sure that they can, be secured when they move from one place to the next. And I'm noticing an increase in these cases. I don't understand why it's happening, but it is.
Same thing apply in nursing homes. If people fall, I mean, do you have cases? I mean, can that apply as well there?
Yeah, but actually, Nick, for some reason, the nursing homes are better at it, and maybe it's because that the population they deal with, it's just kind of second nature. But in the hospitals or the clinics, that standard of care is not adhered to like it is in the nursing homes. And so, like I said, you've got people that, we're supposed to have bed rails put up on the bed, and that's just standard practice, and the nurses will forget to do that. Someone has to go to the bathroom. They're under the influence of medication, so they don't know, what their limitations are. They try to get out of the bed, they roll over, slam and break their elbow or bust their shoulder when they hit the concrete floor.
You've heard him say at least 2 or 3 times in that phrase, standard of care, and that kind of just gets us to, a lot of you may have a negative result in a hospital or a doctor's visit, and you think, maybe do I have a case? You may or may not. They're not miracle workers. They can't save everyone. It's not their fault if they don't all the time. Standard of care is what basically is the baseline for you to determine whether someone has a case, right?
It is. It's the rules of medicine or the rules of nursing practice, the bottom line, if you will, in terms of the amount of care that's supposed to be given. We call it reasonable care under the circumstances, but basically it is, what is the doctor or the nurse supposed to do in a given set of circumstances to provide reasonable care? And if they don't provide that standard, then they can be found negligent.
Yeah, that's how it works. I called you, I think maybe for something else, but to ask you the day after I heard that actor Bill Paxton died.
Yeah.
Okay, and we've talked about this before. Remember, Bill Paxton, of course, you know the actor, Twister, and just a great actor. He's a great character
Apparently
actor.
a great guy, too.
Yeah, and you know, never an Oscar winner along those lines. A lot of people don't win Oscars, but just a good character. Anyway, I love the guy. And he went in for a procedure, was it some type of heart procedure, but he ended up dying from a stroke. And we've talked about this before, where it's a matter of whether they put the pressure packs on. And
right.
and I don't know if I've seen anything on it since, and if the family's filing suit, but certainly no one thought he was going in for some kind of life-threatening surgery that day. I mean, I think this was a procedure they thought they'd complete, and he'd get out, and he'd be better, and he'd be back acting, right?
Yeah, I know very little information about this, Nick. And I suspect
not much has come out.
I think over time we'll learn more, but what little I do know is this was a routine cardiac procedure. Everything was supposed to be fine.
Right.
And he had a complication that occurred after the surgery because he was in the hospital for a while and died from a stroke. And what I can't tell is, was it a blood clot or was it some kind of post-operative bleed? But everyone's been real hush-hush about it, which makes me think that something happened that wasn't either supposed to happen, or there was perhaps some poor care in that case, and I think we'll find out in time what it was, because he's just too young to have died from that kind of complication.
And you think a lot of times seniors are people who are a little bit frail of health, but like even if I go in for some type of surgical procedure and it means I'm going to be confined to the bed without the ability to get up and move around, and think all of us move a bit even if you don't get a lot of exercise, for more than 24 hours. Even someone healthy like me or you, in a bed for 24 hours, what does that put me at risk for?
Blood clots.
Why? I mean, I'm just thinking, I'm laying here, and if I'm not moving for 24 hours, I could get a blood clot?
Right. I mean, it's because blood pools in the legs. It's in the place where gravity will take the blood, and when it becomes congealed, it can cause a clot in the deep veins of the legs. And if part of that clot breaks off, you know, because blood flow from the heart just pumps all the time, and if a part of it breaks off, it can travel into the lungs and ultimately kill you. So it's very, very important that the hospitals make sure that they implement blood clot protection for patients who are going to be immobilized for a period of time until they can get up and get moving and make sure the blood can circulate in their body and prevent clots.
See, that's something I learned from you. And this is something that's developed. That would be in the form of either blood thinners or the pressure socks that they put on.
Pneumatic compression devices that'll squeeze the muscles of the leg to keep the blood circulating, and as well that has the effect of releasing your own natural anticoagulants in your system to prevent blood clots. You know, one thing I wanted to follow up on, though, Nick, about Paxton, this is sort of my rule of thumb. If someone dies in the hospital under the age of 60, I automatically presume something probably went wrong. Now, that doesn't mean it did, but that's always a case I'm going to look at, because in today's medicine, where we are technologically, no one should die in a hospital under the age of 60, particularly if it's a routine same-day procedure. It just shouldn't happen.
All right, on that note, we'll take a break. We've got calls already coming in. The number 737-7587. We've kind of laid some stuff out for you on this. If you're wondering, do I have a case or something, one thing as we go to the break, make the call and ask now, because one other thing you have to remember, there's a 1-year statute of limitations. And we can talk more about that later in the program. But if you call 1 day after 1 year and then have a terrific case, he can't help you because it's expired. If you suspect, call, and here's your chance this morning. We'll be back with your calls, more with attorney Clint Kelly right after this.